Hello, artists and animators. Bardel Entertainment is an animation studio founded in Vancouver by Barry Ward and Delna Bhesania, the Bardell in Bardell. In the 1990s, the studio animated the Raccoons and the Ren and Stimpy show and is more recently known for their work on Rick and Morty, The Dragon Prince, as well as Carol and the End of the World. In addition to their series work, Bardel Entertainment has also been involved in mentorship and outreach programs, including with Britannia Elementary. So we invited Johnny Tesoro and Kenten Bowick to discuss their experiences working on their studio, as well as the role of mentorship in the animation industry. So Johnny, Kenten, welcome to the live stream.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so let's start with some introductions. Johnny, what is your role at Bardel Entertainment, and what does a typical day in your role look like?
Well, I'm the head of 2D animation. I spend most of my day working with our management teams. I usually take a lot of meetings on during the day. So I meet with clients, vendors, our human resources team, our technology team. I'm very involved in recruiting as well. So I will meet with our recruiting specialists. So, but my day isn't always just meetings. A lot of times there's some support for all of our internal artists that we have at Bardell. And so if we have anybody who's struggling, usually I'm the person that we use to help train and give them some proper techniques to get them back on track. Also, I do a lot of planning. A lot of my day requires us kind of looking in a visionary way towards what's next, what our next clients going to need from us, our people, our internal staff, or everyone from production to technology is supported in some way. So I'm involved in those kinds of things. So yeah, I used to be an animator, and now I'm more of an administrator.
I mean, that's an interesting path too, right? Because as you kind of go up the career ladder, you tend to get away, like further away from the work that first brought you into the industry. But Johnny, like, what first interested you in 2D animation?
Well, I've always drawn ever since I was a little boy, and I've always loved cartoons. Um, like just watching Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid. Back in the days when cartoons weren't 24/7, you can only watch them once a week on Saturdays for about 3 hours, or maybe a little longer. But I always loved that time, and I've always really loved cinema. So I'm a huge film nerd as well. So the combination of drawing skill and film together is the birth child of animation for me. So I've always been really drawn to it. And I had a few other careers before I went into animation. So this definitely is a dream job. And I've narrowed down my path for what I wanted to do with the rest of my life a little later in life. A lot of us come to animation right out of high school. I was in my late 20s, so I felt a little bit behind.
And Kenton, how do you describe your role at Bardell Entertainment, and what does a typical day in your role look like?
So I'm the Harmony technical director at Bardell, and I've been in that role for about 5 years. So I kind of oversee the use of Harmony across the whole studio. So sometimes we have multiple projects running in Harmony, and so I started as a build supervisor and grew into this role. So we standardized our character templates, and then started to build tools and stuff for for builds, animation, and compositing and effects. And then I eventually was doing so much of that I got the technical director title. And so I am still doing those things. I'm still making new tools for artists, anything to simplify workflows. Maybe I'd say like 85% of what I make is my own inspiration. Like it's not requested by artists, but I end up working on an animated scene, or I'm doing compositing or building, and then start to see monotonous tasks, and I start to script and code my ways around those to make a tool for everybody then. And so I do a lot of still coding, making tools, but then I also get the luxury of working on all kinds of shots and scenes in the 2D world, things that are often complicated or really time consuming for the artist. So, you know, I'll get brought in early and say, look at this. How do we tackle this? If we just give it to an animator to do the grunt work, it'll take X amount of time. Can you cut it down? So I'll get a shot that's got scrolling backgrounds or 3D objects or like 100 characters, and then try to find a smart way in the builds, smart way of using nodes inside Harmony that maybe aren't used that often, or I'm using them in a strange way, or just go straight to coding some kind of tool that I could automate some kind of process to cut the workflow. So yeah, it's a big diversity of tasks. I get to animate and I get to do coding of tools, and it's all a lot of fun.
Do you have a favorite tool in Harmony?
A favorite tool?
Or no?
Well, I mean, all my favorite tools are things that I've made. Like the line thickness tool that comes out of the box in Harmony was the thing I kind of learned to code from, because I wanted to adjust it to adjust how, like, to fix its limit, what I saw was the limitations. And I read through the code and was like, oh, it's not that many lines. I could probably figure this out. So without a coding background or computer science background, right, I broke it apart and then started to like figure out how to work it, and then expanded it from there, and then started copy pasting all of the other chunks out of the other out of the box scripts to make my own. So yeah, I've made a ton of stuff that I love. But in terms of nodes, like just, I wouldn't say a specific node, but just the amount of attributes that are inside like a normal peg, right? As well as like the expressions, kind of a little used part of Harmony that I grab all the time. I'm always writing expressions to run inside of, whether it's a transparency node. For example, I made a scrolling BG where all the buildings that go to the back, they fade off into the background color, you know, the horizon color, and then maybe dip over
That's
horizon.
cool.
And yeah, so you're using all of those things. You're using like some scripting, using expressions, you're using yeah, everything from the matte blurs and everything, right? So it's a lot of fun. But I love the fact that all of that is exposed, like all of those attributes inside a peg or any node is exposed for us to play with, right? So yeah.
So Johnny, how do you describe Bardel Entertainment and the type of animation that your studio specializes in?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, John, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was typing. I wasn't sure. Just give me 1 second. I'm just replying to someone.
All right. Kenten,
yeah, I can answer that question. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry, Mike. What was the question again? I apologize.
I'll give it to you again. How do you describe Bardel Entertainment and the type of animation that your studio specializes in?
Okay. So we do 2D and 3D animation. We've been around for 37 years now, I'd say. And we mostly focus on adult style cartoons. So shows on the 2D side would be like Rick and Morty. On the 3D side would be like Sausage Party. We've done some features as well, both in 2D and 3D. We currently are working on a feature on the 3D side. What really draws us, I guess, to the studio is the quality of the story, the characters, and the artwork.
And Kenten, from your point of view, do you have anything to add on like what sort of studio Bardel is and the type of productions that you work on?
Specifically, I think like in town in Vancouver here, like Bardell kind of has a reputation for working on those older audiences shows. You know, it's a lot of fun to work on a preschool show, but sometimes, you know, animators are even more excited to work on something that is meant for them, or something that they can be a fan of for their age group. So having a show like Rick and Morty, right? We've brought in a lot of animators that want to work on that show because they're fans of the show. And yeah, so we do have a lot of like, you know, everything from preschool to 8 to 12 shows, right? But having that like sort of having the studio always have an eye on what the next show is, like Carol and the End of the World for Netflix, right? That's meant for these older audiences, really engages the animators in a special way, right? So you get to work on something that then you get to go watch and be a fan of, right? So Bardell's kind of unique that way because of their focus on the adult animation.
Yeah, I mean, when I do think of Bardell's 2D animation, I do think of those productions like Rick and Morty or Carol and the End of the World. And I find that those are very like ambitious productions, like even just on a technical level, where like on Rick and Morty, you have things like background scenes where there are just a ton of unique characters in the background who are incidentals. That's not something that you usually do in 2D animation.
It's true.
100%, yeah, and that comes at a cost of like, you know, we watch the animatics and can get blown over by like, oh boy, that is going to be a ton of work, right? But you know, it makes for stunning results in the end. But yeah, for a show that could have just been a sitcom inside a house, right? If they wanted to keep it really tight and simple. But yeah, that's one of the most ambitious shows around.
For sure.
It takes quite a team to pull it off, right? So
yeah, it takes an army of people, really, and it takes a lot longer than how long it takes to air. Sometimes you work on projects for multiple years, just for one season. For example, Carol and the End of the World, we got in very early on in the stages where, you know, the client was very keen to have us develop the style. They wanted a handcrafted look. So Kenten specifically found an innovation that was going to be elegant and light for our animation teams and compositing teams to create a kind of a little bit of a boiling line that wasn't done before, but it really gave it a textured look and quality to the lines that you wouldn't normally see on a cutout style of show. We also had a lot of time to investigate what the animation style would be. So we had these mock scenes that were storyboarded for us, and then we just tried to create how Carol would move. So that was like almost about 6 months, which is unheard of really in the TV schedule, to spend time on research and development. We were really grateful for that because Carol was a very challenging show technically, but also from an asset point of view. There's a lot of crowds trying to tell the story of the end of the world, so we don't want it to just be a story about a silo of people in an office. Sorry, spoilers for people who haven't seen it. But it's also, you know, we wanted to see how everyone was reacting to the end of the world. It was also a very distinctly different departure from what usually happens in television and TV animation for 2D specifically. It's not a lot of, there's a lot of, it was a lot more of a serious tone. The mood was a little dour, and our main character has very flat affect, which is the exact opposite of cartoony style shows. So it was a challenge for us on the performance side for animation. How do we get this character who basically doesn't have any accents in the dialogue? How do we get them to be engaging to the audience? How do we show that the audience should be invested in this character? Luckily, the character has a nice arc where we go, again, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen the show, but we go from a very, very depressed person who actually somehow finds life-affirming choices and experiences that develop their character, so they come out of their shell. So yeah, really gratifying show. Like Kenten, I wish we could do another season, but it was a limited series, and we learned a lot. Like from a technical point of view, I think Kenten can talk a little bit about, not too much, don't reveal all the secrets, Kenten, but both the CG assets that we used in the show, and a lot of cars, surfboards, things like that would take a lot of time to actually rig and get that same kind of three-dimensional look. But Kenten came up with an elegant solution with our previous pipeline supervisor, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Josh. Yeah. So before I move on, Janelle, this is a question for you. I have our studio reel all ready and warmed up to go. I can share the screen if you all like. Is that something we can do? We should do now, or should we wait?
Yeah, if you share the screen, I'll let you know when we're able to see it on the live stream.
Okay, great. I'll start sharing it now. Nope. It's warming up, everybody. It's warming up. Let me see what's going on. 1 second. Sorry. Just refresh.
Yeah, and while we're getting that queued up, one of the things too I noticed about like Carol and End of the World is that the animation, especially of the main character, is very subtle. It's not that she doesn't react, but like there's a very um I think that the approach to animation is very subtle, very particular, and you don't really see it anywhere else.
Yeah, that came from
Yeah, that.
and the show
Oh, go ahead.
creator. So he had been a writer on Rick and Morty before creating this show, and he had really specific ideas about, if I'm gonna have a close up of Carol's hand running across the wall, like he really had these specific examples in mind of how things would move, and then that's part of the test that Johnny's mentioning, that we did a bunch of back and forth tests, getting feedback from Dan about how he's envisioning this. But he really was aiming for this like restrained main character, and the animation to be like small, like, yeah, restrained, but also very like fluid and kind of beautiful, right, is what he was aiming for. And so hard to kind of, it's difficult to hit that kind of a note when you've got a crowd of 50 dancing people, right? But it's this interesting mix of like really restrained animation within the liveliness of what's going on in the rest of the world. But yeah, that all came from Dan, and then the collaboration back and forth with Bardell, trying to really nail that look, which was interesting because it's a real different type of animation from, say, a Rick and Morty. And so all of our other animators, who some of them came from Rick and Morty to work on this, it's a whole different way of thinking. So we all had to practice and learn how to hit this kind of style.
All right, so we have Bardell's reel up on
you
the
can see
screen.
Carol and the End of the World right here now. That's playing. I can talk you through what you're all seeing. This is Dragon Prince, show that we did for Netflix. It's actually done in Maya, but toon shaded to look more 2D. This is so fast. Sausage Party, the TV series. We saw some other bits. Yeah, this is more Sausage Party. This is Super Kitties, another show that we did for Nickelodeon. This is Genlock. Yeah, this is Teen Titans Go that we do for Warner Brothers. More Super Kitties. This is Rick and Morty. This is season 7. I think, yeah, 7. And this is Solar Opposites. Very similar style to Rick and Morty. This was for Nickelodeon. This is called Rainbow Butterfly Unicorn Kitty. This was a feature that we did called The Prophet. And in Maya, again, toon shaded. This is Puss in Boots that we did for DreamWorks. This is Angry Birds Blue. We did for Rovio and Lego. That's it. I'm sorry, there's no loop button, so I have to keep on doing this. There you go.
It's all good. So one of the reasons why we wanted to speak with you today was your studio's ongoing collaboration with Britannia Elementary School. What can you tell us about the work you've been doing with these students?
Well, it's been about 3 years that we've been working with Britannia. We work with the students that are in grade 5 and 6, so right before they go into junior high school. We initially started just showing them the basics of animation on pencil and paper. And then through the generous donation of Toon Boom to provide us with licenses in Harmony, Bardell donated 25 workstations, so monitors, Wacom tablets, pens, and then with Harmony, we now teach them kind of the industry standard for what it's like to animate in Harmony. And this is coming from us, but we're gearing our knowledge base to children. So Kenten would create an assignment where we have a static background, and then the characters that the kids would create are meant to move through that background in different ways. So one time we had Kenton created this kind of this cave type area where there's this platform that moves across the cave, and in the cave there are stalagmites and stalactites that the characters have to dodge and jump over, or they have the creative freedom to destroy some of these outcroppings of rocks, and then they get to the other side after the platform and something else happens. So it was a lot of fun to kind of see the kids that really gravitate towards art. And we would spend a week in the fall and a week in the spring. We just wrapped actually beginning of April, working with them for a week. What's great is that we see a progression in their skill sets. Initially, just introducing drawing techniques, and then eventually, by the time they get to the second course, the second week, they're using Harmony techniques that you wouldn't expect from a 12-year-old. They're drawing using all the drawing tools. As each student actually has a different skill set. Some of them are great at drawing, some of them are really good at technology. And based on what they provide us, we kind of steer the path of their learning to cater to their specific attributes. So it's a lot of fun, and the kids are, I don't know, Kenton, it's becoming close to my favorite part of my job. Kenton's been teaching much longer. You should talk a little bit about what it's like for you.
Sure, yeah. Like I've been teaching comics and animation for 20 years now. This is my 20th year at a different place, like at an art and music school. And so mostly that's like hand-drawn animation, but stop motion animation too. But over the years, I've had kids working on iPads. I've had them install Flash. I've had them get behind the wheel of Harmony sometimes, right, on my laptop that I bring. And this was the first time to really get like a whole group of kids behind, like at the keyboard with Harmony installed, like the full version to just actually try their hand at. And what's interesting about this is that the classes that I teach for the past 20 years, you sign up to do an animation class, but here we're going into a middle school that's you're taking over the whole class. So you've got your artists and your athletes and your academics and your everything in between suddenly having to animate. So that was a lot of fun to see, like, what does the general public, like, how do they react to this, right? And the first year we did it, we just had them like sort of drawing inside Harmony. So they're just drawing their characters frame by frame. And then we got a little more ambitious the next year, where I created a simple build for them so they could at least be able to move limbs and stuff without having to redraw. And some of the ones who were not so artistic, but some of them really took to that style of, wow, I can really like bring this to life now that it's a build, right? I don't have to draw every hand because I provided a whole bunch and stuff like that. So it really spoke well of Harmony itself, that you could get this general audience, and within just a couple of days of training, right, they're starting to move their characters, they're starting to get ambitious, they're starting to redraw pieces on the build to like customize it all for themselves, right? And and then to be able to go in the fall and then come back in the spring to see, it was interesting to see how much they retained of the workflows and the tools and where to click, and right. And so the learning curve was way shorter the second time. So yeah, I would love to see if we can eventually expand this program to allow kids to take it a second year, a third year, a fourth year as they get older. We'd really see some fascinating results.
Yeah, I mean, animation is a craft where many viewers see the end results, but fewer people outside of the industry have a sense for how like modern productions are made. What do you feel that students learn by visiting a studio like Bardell?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think the big take home, if you've never been to an animation studio or haven't learned about what it takes to create a cartoon, is that it's a team effort. Um, a lot of times, when if you want to delve into a career in animation, you might think that it's one person doing everything from design to animation, but it's really an army of folks, all very talented, all very passionate about working in animation. But that team effort also includes technology. We have a symbiotic relationship with the people who provide us the technical support with the software, with the hardware. Then there's the HR folks, the people that we really rely on for not only support with hiring and recruiting, but also when it comes to struggling artists. We like to really have a life work balance at Bardell specifically. We work really hard, but we don't want people, sacrificing their health to make this beautiful art form. I think the important thing to realize is that everyone gets to service the vision of one creator, the showrunner for whatever cartoon or project we're working on, but you bring a little bit of your own self to the art form. So hopefully within the parameters of what we're doing, you can inject a little bit of your own experiences into the art, whether it's a little secret message about like how, if you're a background artist, sometimes you see like, oh yeah, within the story it would fit that I'm designing something that would fit within this, but it's very personal to me. That's all welcome. So that's the thing about working in a commercial art form. It's not really about your individual um, feelings as an artist that we want to show through. We want to service the individual visionary, but you bring a little bit of yourself to the art forms, which is really beautiful. Because that's what we really want. We don't want you just to do the job and stay in your lane. We want you to kind of bring up ideas, because it all just makes the art form richer after that's done.
Yeah, I want to say
Yeah.
about
Oh,
the Britannia
sorry,
program.
go ahead.
The there's it's kind of interesting how so we're in Vancouver and Hollywood North, right? There's a great awareness that there's a film industry here, right? A television industry here. And there's not so much though. Like in my 20 years of teaching, it's amazing how many kids would come and take an animation class, and yet they and their parents have no idea that there's animation in the city, right? But there's this, there's many studios, there's dozens of animation studios, visual effects studios, and video game studios that are all doing animation, that all require animators, right? So there's like a lack of awareness of that industry, but then also like there's a general lack of awareness of what you're seeing on screen. Like, who made that? How many people did it take to make that? Right? Is this something that I can participate in or no? Right? So just the steps, right, to show the Britannia group, like, okay, here's a build. This is something I made. I drew this hand and this face, right? Now you can draw new faces, draw new hands, draw new expressions, right? That's how it goes. Now you can animate this thing, move it around, right? And that's how shots are made, right? And then you can do multiple shots. And then if this was like a real production, you'd hand it off to another team now to do some lighting effects and maybe the splashes and the fire and the rim lights and the everything, right? So they can kind of learn about like what that whole entire pipeline is, right? From design all the way through builds and then animation, right? And it's funny how that's generally, in my experience, almost no one, even an 18-year-old, comes in with that kind of awareness of like how the industry works. I think everybody kind of knows how live action works, even though we don't know what a gaffer does or what's a best boy, right? That's like very industry inside stuff. But there's awareness of cameras and writers and makeup artists and everything, right? But inside animation, that's it. We there's not a great awareness of those steps, right? So at Britannia, like getting them to dig in and see that we're hoping is opening people's eyes, these kids' eyes, to possibilities of jobs. And we're also mentioning to them, like, you know, somebody has to draw the backgrounds. There's people, that's their whole job, just the backgrounds. Like, and did you know that there's people that like are organizing all the shuttling of files and the, you know, organization of people's schedules to get what done on time. Like those production people, that's people's full-time job, right? They love animation. They came into this job because they love animation. And maybe, you know, they're not an artist, but they want to work in the industry. And there's all of these people working in these things. So we're sort of giving them this education at the same time to get a sense of like, this is an industry that requires a lot of people, and there might be a place for you.
All are welcome.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting too, right? Because it's not just that everybody's working on art, but there's also coordination of getting a bunch of people all producing assets that are required for a TV show to exist, right? Like that is a huge feat of coordination and almost like engineering. I wanted to ask you both, what are your views on the role that mentorship plays in an artist's career development? And did you have mentors when you were entering the industry?
Do you want to continue, Kenton? I can answer after you.
Yeah, roles of mentorship. So, like, I went to animation school at Vancouver Institute of Media Arts, where they were just teaching harmony. I specifically tried harmony one day, fell in love with it, and then signed up for their program, their one-year program to do animation. Wasn't interested in like hand-drawn flash, right? I knew I wanted to do harmony animation, so I went and did that program. And you know, that kind of education is invaluable, right? It was excellent, and that's why I have the position I have today. But beyond that, right, in our studio, there's all kinds of like mentorship opportunities. Like I've trained a lot of people to do different parts of the pipeline. Like for example, we've had many times where we start a show and something gets delayed. Animators have been brought on, but there's no animation work yet. So we'll grab a bunch of animators and train them to be builders, right? We'll get a bunch of animators like after their contract and hold on to them and train them to be compositing artists, right? And so we're mentoring them in their like these extra skills that are sort of outside of their skill set. And I find that anytime anyone is being trained like person to person, nowadays it's mostly inside meetings and in Zoom, and we'll record this stuff and make it available for the rest of the studio, point artists towards it afterwards. But you know, pre-COVID, it was all like inside the studio, being with people at their workstations. Anytime that we were doing this sort of one-on-one training, I found that you saw like an acceleration in people's abilities, right? As they were maybe even animating for 10 years. But then now they suddenly have to do some builds or some compositing. And they're like, oh, they start to see the wider pipeline. And you'd start to see them sort of pull away from the rest of their cohort, because now they've got this like wider view of like what the software can do, or what the other teams are in the pipeline are doing. And so anytime that I have the ability to share some knowledge with anyone at the studio, I take advantage of it. And Johnny can speak to like mentorship programs that they've worked on. Like, go for it. I think I ran out of gas on that one.
No, you took all the best answers. Everything I was going to say. You said. The only thing I'll add is that for us, mentorship is a vital role. It's really a win-win, because when one teaches, one receives questions about their process, about the foundation of their skill set. So if someone is new to the task of animation, in all departments, having to answer fundamental, basic, elementary questions allows you to think about things that you may have forgotten the reason why we do things. So it's a nice way to challenge yourself in solidifying your own foundational base of knowledge. So I think that, like Kenten was saying, most of our supervisors, most of our seniors and leads, they all do some kind of teaching of some kind. It's important for you as in your career development to share what you know, not only to solidify your foundation, but also everyone needs to understand a formal process, a way of doing things that they may or may not know all the tips and tricks on how to do. And it's just one of those things where it becomes part of your career. The better you can communicate with someone who doesn't understand what is required and what the expectations are, the better you will be at communicating with the rest of your team, with clients, with vendors, all those kinds of things. So yeah, we love mentorship here. Oh, one last thing. We used to have an apprenticeship program before the pandemic that I used to run for about 7 years, where we would reach out to new graduates from school, burgeoning animators who had work before but were still struggling to find work for whatever reason. And then we'd have them apply to Bardell. It was a paid internship, and then they would actually get credit on a show that we were working on. A lot of them came on to work on Teen Titans Go or Rick and Morty, and in all aspects of the department. So in backgrounds, we had a storyboarding apprenticeship, and I ran the character animation one as well. So that's really, I think, a very helpful and vital program to have at any studio, is an ability to not only show how to do the work, but also a studio style of working. So we want folks who are really interested in learning not only the ins and outs of the industry, but what it'll be like to work for us at Bardell.
Yeah, to your point too, right? Like there is a difference between being able to draw something and being able to talk about the line quality, the color, or the timing and
Mhm.
spacing of a scene. Um, do you have advice for artists who want to mentor and help guide up and coming talent?
Yeah, I mean, we live in a wonderful age of technology where you can learn just about anything online. It doesn't even have to be a formal program. You can just, if you have the dedication and the will, you can just look at things that are on any medium, streaming services, or you can download things, you can frame by frame, you can kind of understand it that way. That's kind of how a lot of us who are old enough to remember things before the internet, that's kind of how we learned. But now you can go and have online courses from the comfort of your own home, not even having to leave it, to learn the craft, and it's pretty amazing. I'm not sure if I answered your question,
Ken,
Mike.
no, I think you did. Kenton, do you have any advice for artists who want to mentor and help guide up and coming talent?
Advice for artists who want to mentor guide talent. So let me see. Like that's we're talking outside the context of like a studio, right? So just out in the wild kind of thing. Yeah, the I mean, it's the tricky thing is that if you're talking specifically about animation and harmony, then
Right.
you know there's not a lot of online resource for people. There's some, right? There's some channels on YouTube that tell you how to rig, how to everything, right? And those are good. It's just that, you know, because so much of what is done in harmony in the world is done inside a studio, then studios don't make those tutorials for the public, right? So for any artist that is has the time, the bandwidth, the ambition to help other artists, like if you're making YouTube tutorials, if you're doing one-on-one, right? I would applaud you, because that's maybe that's going to be a wonderful way to sort of grow the talent, like the upcoming talent. Um, you know, advice would be to, because as trainers ourselves, Johnny and I, right, for doing either inside the studio or for all of these kids, right? It's, I think, like the learning curve of harmony is high, like is steep, right? So there's a lot of patience required for the users as there's a lot of user frustration as they're starting their journey, right? And they have an idea of what they want to accomplish, but it's hard to get there immediately, right? There's a lot of clicking, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of ways to break a rig, there's a lot of, right, a lot of redraw that has to happen, stuff like that can be frustrating. And so patience with the newbies, right, with the people that are first experiencing this stuff is essential. And you know, it's interesting when I've worked with people that are outside the studios that are working on harmony. It's a lot of like shuttling scenes back and forth. I've got a problem with this, I can't get this to work. And then so you're shuttling harmony scenes back and forth. A lot of things are not easy to address over Zoom, like over, right, if you were in the same space, you could sit at the console, click and see what the problems are, right? But yeah, even just like addressing some simple issues can be a little bit tricky. So, you know, there's like, it's patience all around, right? I get files sent to me, you know, a lot of Google Drive, download the scene, open it up, try to find the things. And I'm a pretty good technician, right? Diagnostics are, troubleshooting is one of my loves. You know, the Sherlock Holmes part of my brain gets activated. And, but, you know, that's to be able to help younger animators, you know, on their journey like that is a lot of fun. It's a little bit, it can get frustrating getting through some of these technical hurdles, right? Until you find out, oh, you're doing this part wrong. Oh, you've misinterpreted this. Oh, something's not working on yours, right? Oh, maybe it's this node, something, right? But so it's a long story short, it's a patience as people are like trying to get through these technical hurdles for yourself and for them, right? And but at the end, you know, just the joy of seeing your own stuff come to life is for me always the goal, right? That's always the reward at the end. So yeah, there's nothing I love better than seeing what a student or, you know, somebody I'm mentoring has been working on, to see it finally come to life, right, is magical. I never get tired of it.
What's the coolest
One
thing
thing
you saw a student do?
Oh, sorry. Can I just add, just to Kenton's point, that Toon Boom has an amazing Learn portal as well. For those of you who are wanting to learn this, you can very easily learn from Toon Boom itself, and you don't have to necessarily just learn harmony. There's also a storyboard Pro certification you can take as well. And if you already have those skills, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, there's an upskill program through Toon Boom. I've looked over the certifications, and they're all amazing. Actually, quite close to they are industry standard. Every studio has their own kind of style, but I think this is a great foundation to start from. So yeah, go to toonboom.com.
Since you mentioned it, we do have a Learn portal at learn.toonboom.com, and we also offer instructor-led training at toonboom.com/training. One thing I really wanted to ask you both, how would you describe the workplace culture of Bardell? And was there anything that you learned while working and collaborating with artists at your studio?
Yeah, that's a good question. For us, I think we strive for high quality with the life-work balance. That's our workplace culture. Some places that I remember when I was applying, they would make the studio so comfortable that it was almost implied that they didn't want anybody to leave. And that's not what we do at Bardell. What we like to do is make it comfortable while you're there. And a lot of people work on a hybrid, or they work from home kind of way. So when they are in the studio, we try and make it fun. But we don't want people sacrificing their health in order to make a show. So I think that's the biggest part of our culture is just trying to encourage people to work hard, bring their passions and their creativity to the work, but also it's important to decompress, spend time with your friends and family, and not be so overworked. Because once you're unhealthy, then now you're no longer a help to the studio or yourself. So yeah, I always encourage people to get to finish their day at a reasonable amount of time and then just go back and recharge, because I think you can't make good art unless you have well rested, healthy animators and artists.
And to answer your question about what I've learned from other people, I came into Bardell as a build supervisor. So my first job was teaching and running a team of builders. And then pretty quickly, though, I ended up, like, when those first projects wrapped, then I could have either changed studios to find another build super position, but then I was offered, like, well, you can stay on if you want to do compositing. So I joined the comp team on Rick and Morty, and then suddenly I'm outside of my skill set, right? And after having worked like 2 years as a build supervisor, and that I found, like, I'm a technical director now because of those experiences. So being able to work on a compositing team, compositing effects team, getting some training from the other, like joining it midstream because the season was already in progress, and then getting training from the comp department, right? And the other compositing artists showing me the things they're doing, room lights and all these lighting effects and computer screens and right, all of this stuff. And seeing how that's all done and then expanding my skills there turned out to be, at the time I was just happy to have some extra work, but that turned out to be really foundational, because then my understanding of what everyone is doing in Harmony really widened, right? And then going to do a bunch of animation and then back to builds and then back to doing compositing, right? And I keep doing this dance through the years. And I found that the people, each time I would change around, then I would get some new education from the soups and the leads, right? From the teams that are already there. And there's a list in my head of all the things that that I can do now, and I can attribute that came from this person, that came from this compositing artist, that came from that supervisor, that came from that lead, right? And I could never have planned to have that kind of an education, and I couldn't map out a similar path for anybody else. It all just kind of happens by chance. But yeah, just being open to taking other positions on a production, but especially being open to your fellow artists, listening to the things that they're doing and the techniques that they're using, right? Is really valuable, and it can really feed back into your own use of the software.
It's funny, I find that whenever I talk to compositing artists, no one ever really plans to go into compositing, but they always find like an opportunity, or someone asks them, hey, can you do comp on this scene? And their answer is like, maybe. Was that sort of like your experience too?
Yeah, like there's a lot of compositing artists that maybe they were a little slow as animators, right? And so then they ended up getting moved into comp to be able to, like, back when, depending on the types of shows and depending on the year, right, when quotas were very enforced, right, at the time, then we'd sort of like shuffle people out if we thought they'd be a better fit here or here. Sometimes you end up with builders, sometimes you end up as a compositing artist. But yeah, now it's interesting that when it comes time for me to, I've got a new tool I need testing, right? I will go to the compositing artists first, because in my mind, they're the ones that generally have the widest knowledge of the use of Harmony, right? Because they're using all kinds of nodes to accomplish all kinds of things. As we do, for example, I guess it's good to mention, at our studio, we used to use After Effects for all this, like the compositing, but eventually we switched over years ago to everything is done in Harmony. So we're doing every bit of lighting and effects inside Harmony now. So those compositing artists end up to be some of the best technical artists in the studio. And then when we need help in builds, that's the group we'll go to first and pull a bunch of comp artists back onto builds. And when we need help in comp, we'll pull builders first over into the comp department, because those two end up, you know, in animation, a lot of art, a lot of knowledge of the software, right? But you can really focus on just a few attributes inside Harmony, like a few tools and things that, right, you're focusing most only on the performance. Your technical knowledge might just stay within a certain realm. But in builds, and especially in comp, right, you really have to have this wider view, and you start to get really knowledgeable about everything. Comp artists end up having to clean up a lot of animation and fix a lot of things, so they end up having to learn all the latest deformers and animation techniques too, because they have to go in and adjust a little bit of performance or something. And so while it maybe used to be that just like a failed animator would get pushed into comp, now I think it's really drawing people that are like interested in the software, people with a little more of a technical mindset, and yeah, like people that a lot of the comp artists that I know are pretty passionate about it now, right? Of Harmony itself and of the job they're doing day to day.
So the most important question I have for you, because we're running towards the end of the live stream, where can our audience go to see more of Bardel Entertainment, the work that your studio does, and maybe even apply for openings at your studio?
Well, we're pretty much everywhere. All the streaming services have something that we worked on. So you can see us on Disney Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime. You can see us on Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network. A lot of our shows for 2D and 3D are on all those platforms. What was the second half of your question, Mike? Sorry.
Applying for a job?
Yeah.
Oh, applying for work. Yeah. I think the best is just to go to LinkedIn. I spoke with our recruiting specialist, Jimmy, and he was saying that there's a lot of other sources. You can go to our website, but LinkedIn seems to be a nice way to compile where all the job postings are for us as well as any other studio. But I would say, like, take a look at our website, see the kind of show reels that we do, just peruse through, and there's always a section for the job postings. Right now, there aren't a lot for 2D. We're kind of hitting an industry doldrum where things are quite slow, but there are some CG postings there as well. Sometimes there are departments that kind of override whether you're wanting to work in 2D or 3D, like design or storyboards. Those can be for either side of the aisle, 2D or 3D. So that's what I'd say. It's also Indeed. I think there's a Creative Heads network that you can subscribe to for a newsletter. Same with LinkedIn. They also have something like that where you can filter your choices for what kind of job openings you'd like to look for.
All right. Well, Johnny, Kenten, thank you both so much for taking time to discuss your work at Bardel Entertainment, as well as your mentorship at Britannia Elementary School. If students are watching this, one of our best kept secrets is that Toon Boom Animation offers student licenses at a significant discount if they aren't already provided by your school. You can visit toonboom.com/students for more details. And if you enjoyed this live stream and want to watch more, check out our blog at blog.toonboom.com for our monthly stream schedule. This coming Wednesday, we'll be hosting Collaboratory with Mike Morris and special guest Alessandra Sorrentino, who worked on projects like Nimona, Wolfwalkers, and Ron's Gone Wrong, so you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thanks, everyone.